is that bring responsibility for those countries who participated in the summit in Egypt? I'm talking about Turkey and Qatar, because both of these two countries, during the interview, Witkoff said, and in the aftermath of signing the document, they were hugging Israelis, and they thought that they could get something from Israel. But is that the case? What is the responsibility on the part of these two Muslim countries when it comes to this sort of behavior on the part of Israelis?
No one should be fooled. They're not supporters of the Palestinian people, neither the Erdogan regime nor the regime in Qatar. Neither of them are pro-Palestinian. They are firmly in the American camp, as opposed to their people. The people of Turkey are staunch supporters of the Palestinian cause, but the regime in Ankara, they are in the American camp. The hug when the Qatari and the Turkish officials hugged the Israelis, they basically whitewashed the Holocaust. And even attending this disgraceful and despicable meeting was an insult to all the martyrs and the women and children who were massacred in the Holocaust. And it was whitewashing Trump's crimes, just so that they could get into his good books. Everyone should support the resistance, and the resistance had every reason to accept a ceasefire under its own terms, and we should all continue to support it. The pressure that they feel is enormous. But for these countries to continue to do business and trade with the Israeli regime after 2 years of Holocaust, for any country to have anything to do with the Israelis, I mean, the Qatari regime was just bombed. A Qatari citizen was killed, and then they go and hug these ethno supremacists. And the same is true with the Erdogan's allies who were in that session, his people hugging the Israelis. Just being there was an insult to the martyrs and the victims of the Holocaust. Yes, we all support the ceasefire in the way in which the resistance is pursuing this ceasefire, but to give any sort of concession or to show thanks and gratefulness to the American regime or to the Israeli regime is just, for me, it's just something beyond my comprehension.
Netanyahu, he has ruled out any Turkish and Qatari involvement in Gaza's post-war administration. What is that, Professor Marandi? What is the plan? It seems to me that during the interview with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they're planning to reconstruct Gaza and settle, bringing these settlers to Gaza, little by little, gradually. That's the plan. That's the master plan on their part. It's not just about reconstruction of Gaza. It's something beyond that, but they want to do it, wrap it up in something beautiful, something that makes them capable to sell it to the world. Is that possible?
There won't be any reconstruction for the Palestinian people. And the reason why the Israeli regime can say no to Erdogan and to the regime in Doha is because he knows that they can't do anything about it. Are they going to help the resistance? Are they going to? We know that they've never given a single bullet to the resistance. They do trade, they do business. Oil goes through Turkey to Israel. Ships go back and forth despite pretending otherwise. The Qatari regime, of course, does extensive cooperation with the regime. They, along with other oil and gas rich family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, give money to the likes of Kushner and to the likes of Witkoff, and they invest in Israel. They invest in occupied Palestine. We all know that. This is nothing that they can hide. So why should the Israeli regime give them any concession easily when they pose no threat to the regime, where they have no leverage against the Israeli regime? When the Iranians, as we speak, the Iranians continue to support Hamas. Where do you think the money comes, or the equipment comes to make more tunnels? And they're not just, you know, they need support to be able to fight for 2 years. The same is true with Yemen, with the resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere. So when they don't support them, they have no leverage anyway. But the point is, why should they even want to be a part of a process that the Americans have defined and that the Israelis have defined? They should be fully against any element of this ceasefire plan that goes against the demands of the Palestinian people. All of Gaza has to be liberated. And the Palestinian people have to have full authority over their own land. And the Israeli regime must be expelled. How can they do that? Break off ties with the Israeli regime. Stop doing business and trade. And people across the region and beyond have a responsibility to put pressure on governments. People across Europe are doing it. We saw enormous protests in Italy, in Spain, and elsewhere. People have to put pressure. These governments obviously don't reflect public opinion. They don't reflect the needs of the Palestinian people. So ultimately, there should be no collaboration or cooperation with Trump or with Kushner or with Witkoff, let alone with Netanyahu, let alone hugging Israel. After they've carried out a genocide, they hug these people? It's, again, it's just something I cannot comprehend. How are you, forget the issue of the two-state solution and the single-state solution. How is anyone going to have leverage to force the Israeli regime to withdraw from Gaza if there isn't real pressure? How can you have trade with the Israeli regime? How can you have political ties with the Israeli regime? How can you sell them oil or import gas from such a regime and then expect it to back down? It's not going to do that. The only thing that will make the Israeli regime back down and the regime in Washington back down and all the collaborators back down is for there to be resistance. And the resistance puts pressure, and that pressure causes them to step back.
I don't know if there is anybody in the West who has any sort of leverage on Netanyahu, because during the interview again, they confessed, if they're honest in the way that they talk about its attack on Doha, they said they were shocked, they were surprised by the Israeli attack on Doha. And Trump called them and somehow said that what they're doing, they're not, this is not going to benefit Israel with this sort of behavior. Who has, do you think, is there anybody in the United States who have leverage on Netanyahu? If the president of the United States doesn't know what's going on with Israel, what would be the next plan on their part? How do you see the sort of relationship they have between the United States under the Trump administration and Netanyahu?
They have leverage. They choose not to use it. Trump, in his really ridiculous speech in the Knesset, admitted that when Adelson wanted to see him, he'd tell him this is not how it works, but then he would come and see him anyway. And he would give him concession after concession. And he admitted that Adelson, his wife, and Adelson himself, that they cared about Israel, not the United States. Their priority was the Israeli regime. They're not faithful or patriotic Americans. So Trump was admitting that he's doing this for the Israeli regime. He's Israel first. That's a huge admission. He has the leverage. He chooses not to use it. Just as Turkey and Qatar and Egypt and the Emirates and all these countries, they have leverage. If they break off all ties with the Israeli regime, Netanyahu is weakened. The West is weakened. And more pressure is put on Netanyahu to change course. There's no doubt about that. So the leverage exists, but the pressure is not being, these regimes, these regional regimes that are basically collaborators, they pretend to be pro-Palestinian. I mean, the circus in Egypt was just painful to watch. It was painful to watch. These leaders go there and act like, I don't want to be insulting on your show, so, but act in a way which, where Trump is basically the master and they're like, he's the ringmaster and they're in the circus. That's how it is. That's how it looked. So that leverage exists, but with these leaders, with these governments, with these collaborators, of course that leverage decreases. What leverage does have an impact? The leverage of the resistance in Lebanon, the leverage of the resistance in Iran, in Yemen, that has an impact. The pressure that the Yemenis put on the Israeli economy, the regime's economy, was enormous. That's why the Americans attacked Yemen. If it wasn't enormous, they wouldn't have attacked Yemen. They wouldn't have slaughtered innocent Yemeni citizens. And yet they failed. And as a result, the pressure continued. If that was not effective, the Americans wouldn't have attacked. If the resistance in Lebanon was not causing the Israeli regime enormous difficulty, they would not have carried out those massive genocidal attacks with the support of their Western allies and their collaborators inside Lebanon. If Iran's support for the Palestinian people was not very effective, its direct and indirect support, they would not have attacked Iran and faced a humiliating defeat after 12 days. So pressure works. Pressure creates leverage. But if someone does not want to use that leverage in the hope that he can get a better business deal with Trump or a better tariff deal, then that person is using the Palestinian people and Palestinian blood for his own personal gain.